Thank you, Larry, for being here. Let's welcome Larry Pass.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, Tina. And of course, Mary Lynn and Randy, and always Skip up in the God booth there. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And as Randy said, I asked him to do that, and I thought it would just be a real simple thing. Just, do this song, get the music for it or whatever. A little bit more complicated than that, but maybe I'll go into that another time. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do today, it occurred to me like a couple of weeks ago that phrase, "got to get you into my life." And so that's the title of this message as well, and so that's why I asked for the song. Because the idea is to get it into our lives, not just in those moments of meditation. I'm already off script, so that's fine. When I was preparing I'm going to be up and down and around a lot, Randy. So be prepared. When I was preparing for this, I was reading some Ernest Holmes, of course, and also watching all the other messages from this month, both being here and on YouTube, so be aware that you can do that. And in addition, I watched some TED Talks and some of Steve Jobs' presentations, because I wanted to see how the really masterful presenters do it, hoping maybe to get a little from osmosis. And I don't know if I got any of that, but I did see that Steve Jobs said something that really struck home for me. He said that when he's thinking about a new product, he always asks the question, and I should have made this bigger, what incredible benefits can I give to the customer? And that really resonated with me, because whenever I do a message, and it's been, believe it or not, 7 months since the last time I did a message up here. Whenever I do a message, that's the question that's always in my mind. What incredible benefits can this message give to the people here at the Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces, New Mexico, and perhaps out to the YouTube audience as well? And the answer is always, in one version or another, is always the same. It is spiritual development leading toward spiritual transformation. Because whenever I'm here, whether I'm in this seat or in one of those seats, that's what I'm looking for. That the people who walk out of this room are different from the people who walked in. A spiritual transformation. And one of the other things that I listened to this week was a talk by an NLP trainer named Michael Breen. And he was saying that years ago, when he was studying singing, his singing teacher told him, "Okay, Michael, when you rehearse," Michael's a very big guy, even probably not as big as Randy, but still a very big guy. And he said, when you rehearse, I want you to stand like a Roman centurion and imagine you have an iron breastplate while you're rehearsing and sing that way. And so he did. And when it came time for his recital, he went out in front of the audience and stood like a Roman centurion and imagined his breastplate and started singing. And his teacher said to him afterwards, "Well, that was good, Michael, but tell me, why were you rehearsing in front of the audience?" See, the exercise that he gave him was in order to develop a skill, but there's a difference between rehearsing and performing, is there not? There is a difference between practicing and doing, developing a skill and using that skill. There's a difference between that 1 hour of meditation a day and getting it into your life. This is, after all, the center, not the Center for Spiritual Rehearsing, it's the Center for Spiritual Living. Got to get you into my life. Let me give a few examples. For instance, football players, when they are training, they will run around the circuit. They will do that running. When it's game time, they're not running around the field like that. A boxer will practice with a jump rope to get his timing and his rhythm and his stamina, but he doesn't take the rope with him into the ring. That's only for practice. It's not for the actual performing. Now, I think that a lot of you have seen or participated in a mindfulness exercise where you take an orange and you take one of the sections of it. And you take it out, and you very mindfully put it to your mouth and bite down and feel the juice going through you, and so on. But you're not going to eat an orange that way in real life. If you don't have that bridge of the practice to the real way you're going to be eating, then there's something lacking from this kind of a practice. That is, how do you get from standing like a Roman centurion when you're rehearsing to just singing for the audience? There's that gap that you have. Or again, these walking meditations where you walk, watch out, Randy, where you walk, watch out, Larry, keep your balance, very slowly and mindfully, noting how the pressure of the floor is on your feet and how the muscles and all that. That's fine, but you're not going to do that when you're going shopping. So how do you get it into your life to walk mindfully when you're going shopping, when you're walking in the world? A couple of weeks ago, I think it was, Ron Zaharsky was here, and he told this story about this 8-year-old girl who had awakened to her Buddha nature almost overnight. And the point of the story was that everyone has the Buddha nature. You and I and everyone in this room and everyone in the world has the Buddha nature. And I was thinking, okay, but that leads to a question. In the 25 centuries of Buddhist practice and Buddhist teaching and Buddhist training, there have been billions and billions of Buddhists and only a handful of Buddhas. Why is that? If everyone has the Buddha nature and this practice and this training and this learning is all in service to awakening to your Buddha nature, why does it happen so seldom? What's missing? What's lacking? Well, if I had the answer to that, I'd be up here a lot more often. But it did lead me to another question, which is why, after all this time, is there still something lacking from all this training and this teaching? And of course, I'm not singling out Buddhism. There are a lot more Hindus than there are Mahatmas. There are a lot more Christians than there are saints, let alone Christs. So what is going on? Why is there this gap between a practice and the living, between training and actually achieving what the training is supposed to be for? And as I say, I don't have the answer to the first question, but I think I know why there is something missing. There's a story about a university president, big prestigious university, who goes to the head of the physics department complaining to him about that department being the most expensive department in the entire university because they want all this equipment that each piece costs millions and millions of dollars. He says, why can't you be more like the math department? All they ever ask for are paper and pencils and erasers. And after a pause, he says, and the theology department is even cheaper. They never ask for erasers. There's a certain complacency in the religious sphere, I think, a certain hesitancy, too. It's like, oh, the masters knew this, we shouldn't mess with what they were saying. But also, I think, a certain complacency, a certain idea that, yes, we know all the spiritual principles that make up the world, and so we don't have to explore more or study more. And I wanted to explore that a little bit deeper. I want to look at the distinction between science and religion in their attitudes and then bring it back to religious science. Less than 100 years ago, scientists discovered that there are what they consider to be 4 basic forces in the physical universe. And of those 4, they knew about 2 before, electromagnetism and gravity, and they really didn't know much about them like 300 or 400 years ago. Now think about that. In the hundreds of millennia of human existence, in the thousands of years of human civilization, we only learned about the basics of the way the physical nature of the universe works in an eye blink ago. Can we be so arrogant as to assume that we've learned all the basic principles of the spiritual nature of the universe, which is harder to experiment with? The physical nature is right out there in front of us, and we can do these experiments and exploration. How could it possibly be that we know all there is to know about the principles of the spiritual nature of the universe and the tools of how to use them. I think that in terms of what we know about the spiritual nature of the universe, we're like at the beginning of the agricultural revolution. You know, we know how to poke a stick in the ground and put a seed in there and cover it up and hope for the best. That's about where we are, humanity in general. There are, of course, the Mahatmas and the Buddhas and the saints who have done a little better. But that's where we are in terms of the religions of the world and the spiritual thinking of the world. And then about 150 years ago, New Thought came along with Phineas Quimby. And this was the age when science was making discoveries just left and right and learning all sorts of things about the physical nature of the universe. In physics and biology and chemistry, you name it, they were learning all kinds of things. And so Quimby took that attitude to the religious sphere. And he started experimenting and learning some things that perhaps people in the past didn't know or had only intuited. And then from Quimby went on to some theory with Troward and with Emma Curtis Hopkins. You're starting Hopkins this week, right? Did I get it right? Emma Curtis Hopkins, and of course with Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science. And Ernest Holmes came up with a new technique to deal with these principles, to use them, not just to practice, but to use, to get it into your life. And he called this, of course, spiritual mind treatment, or also scientific prayer. And the reason it's called scientific prayer is that it's supposed to work scientifically. It's supposed to be reliable. It's supposed to be repeatable. It's not a hit and miss type of prayer. Well, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. The idea was to have this as a scientific way of going about things. And you see that over and over again in his writings. That's why he called it science of mind. That's why he called it religious science. Now, so far that's, a better stick to put in the ground. Maybe it's a little sharper, maybe it aerates the soil a little better, but we still don't have a plow, let alone a combine, or know how to fertilize the ground. We still need to know an awful lot, both in terms of new principles that haven't been discovered, and in terms of techniques to use those principles, again, in our lives, not just sitting back, counting our breaths. And again, there's that hesitancy in the religious sphere. The remarkable thing about that story that Ron Zaharsky told to me was when they found this 8-year-old girl who had awakened to her Buddha nature, nobody asked, how did she do it? How did she do it? Did we know how to do it? Can we teach it? Can we learn it? Can we do it too? Nothing like that was going on. That's something that, again, I think New Thought and religious science have a different attitude to, or can have a different attitude about. Now, let me sit for a moment. The theme for this month is drawing in our good. And that leads me to think about, have you seen the new Maxwell House commercials? Their slogan is good to the last drop and has been forever. And the good people at Maxwell House know that they're not selling you a premium coffee. And so the entire theme of their new campaign is more or less that it's good enough, which is an interesting take on your product, but I don't think we want to be drawing in our good enough. We want to be drawing in our good. And I also noticed that the theme is drawing in our good. I think a number of the speakers up this month have talked about drawing in your good, which is good also. But I ask, what is our good? Is it the sum of each of our individual goods? And yes, it is. But it is also our good as a community. And I did notice that so many of the speakers this month did talk one way or another about community. Reverend Bonnie talked about community. Randy Harris talked about community. Ron Zaharsky talked about community. He said, we're all on the same team. We just don't have the uniforms yet, in George Carlin's phrase. So what is our good as a community? And I come back to spiritual transformation. What was that theme that came out of the visioning? Brand new and improved. To walk out of here, brand new and improved versions of the people who walked in. Because if we were all spiritually transformed, when we all achieve that awakening to our Buddha nature and are out in the world, then unlike the monks in the story, people are going to ask us, how did you do this? How did you get this? Can I learn it too? Where can I go to learn it? Well, there's this place in the downtown mall. We couldn't keep people out. We'd have to bar the doors when we achieve that spiritual transformation. So that's what I think our good is. And Peggy Shin talked last week about my life as a laboratory. And you see that phrase in some of the classes that we take. Now, I'm going to distinguish between, when I was in college, I was a science student. I never became a scientist. A science student learns what the scientists of the past, and perhaps the present, did, what they learned, what principles they came up with, what all the science is. A scientist in his laboratory, or her laboratory, discovers new things. So are we religious science students, or are we religious scientists? Are we committed to discovery? Because, as I say, in all the teachings that any religious movement has ever had, it's just a hit or miss method to spiritual transformation. Maybe an 8-year-old girl just wakes up one day and is spiritually transformed. Maybe a monk watching his breathing for 30 years and he's got some benefit from it, but he hasn't awakened to his Buddha nature. We have to discover those new methods. We have to discover those new principles as religious scientists. I was scurrying this morning to find an Ernest Holmes reference, and I just closed the book. That was silly. Well, here's the book. The Philosophy of Ernest Holmes. That's Holmes Papers, Volume 1. This is okay. One of them says the unpublished works of Ernest Holmes, which I've always found odd to put in a book you're publishing. And I know it's here. Let me just, I can't believe I did that. I know it's toward the end of the chapter. Yes. He says here, we have launched a movement which is destined in the next 100 years to be the great new religious impulsion of our day and of modern times, far exceeding in its capacity to envelop the world anything that has happened since Mohammedanism, as he calls it, started. I'm going to skip around because I didn't prepare this until this morning. We have to be open. His phrase is open at the top. That's that discovery. That's that experimenting with new things in the laboratory of your life. We have to be open. People come along and know so much more than we do that it is just funny, but it will come out of this little we know. And back, I'm convinced our movement is a thing of destiny. Something new and grand will have appeared. We are the forerunners of a new race of people. Find a new kind of mind there, to get back to the song lyric. We are the arbiters of the fate of unborn generations. We are the custodians of the chalice of truth. We have a song to sing. We have a joy to bring to the world, and love and peace and happiness. He says here, and this is shortly before he died, unfortunately, I am ready to introduce new thoughts and new ideas into our movement. We don't know what they were. Starting the first of the year, which I think will be transcendent. I believe we are just starting. I believe we can do something to ourselves psychologically that will yield the same faith and conviction in our science and our truth that the electrician has when he wires a building. These are the principles. These are the tools and techniques that we have yet to discover. I think that Ernest Holmes expected us to be committed to that kind of discovery, to that kind of experiment, to that kind of using that laboratory of our lives for new things, not just as science students to learn what people knew before. This is just coming to me, probably not now, but maybe in the fall, maybe in the autumn, we can develop a religious science research facility here to start doing new and innovative research into the principles of new thought and religious science. And wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Again, if we do that, and if we can make it happen and have some results from it, we won't be able to keep people away from here. That's what spiritual transformation is for. That's how we get it into our lives. And I don't have a finish for this at all. So I'm just going to say, and so it is.